Hi, this is our second video on non-legal sources or non-traditional legal sources. And in this video, I'm going to show you just a few places to look for information about people, including judges and lawyers, and also just a teeny bit about statistics. And we're going to start on Lexis Advanced because they have a tool I really like, the Litigation Profile Suite. But before we go to that tool, I just wanted to talk a minute about the public records. I mentioned this in the overview that we don't have access to it on our academic subscriptions, although it's a very valuable database, very useful database if you have it at work. And at least on our Lexis Advanced screen, it would be accessible if we had it here on this front page or under this drop-down menu. There's a category for public records. Okay, since we don't have access to that and I just can't show it to you beyond what I showed you in the PowerPoint, I'm going to show you what we can access, which is the Litigation Profile Suite, which is a great tool. And this is a suite that you would use to get information about expert witnesses, and if I show you this drop-down, judges or attorneys. So we're going to start with expert witnesses. And if you know a person's name, you could start typing it here, starting with their last name. Usually when you're searching for an expert witness, you're probably looking for somebody maybe by location and category. So rather than search everything, you can use these limitation fields here to limit your search. Okay, just to save a little bit of time, I've used the drop-down menus to limit by location and also to forensic psychology, which I found under medicine and then medical forensics. So I kind of opened up a whole bunch of drop-down menus, but you could open and close these or search in a broader category. And you don't need to put a name in here. You can just search by these categories. So that makes it really useful. If you don't have an expert in mind, you can find a list of potential experts for your case that you could use. We're just going to take a quick look at Carol Ball and see what's available here on Lexis. You can see that I'm getting some basic biographical information. I can tell what jury verdict she's been involved with. I can look at analysis of her expert testimony, the cases that she's been involved with, also some secondary materials if she's been in the news. Some of these are not very exact searching, so it's not always the right person. But what's really helpful are the top categories so that you can browse and see who's hired her before, what was the resolution. You can look up in these cases and see what her testimony was to get a sense before you hire her of what kind of an expert witness she is. Okay, let's go back to the Litigation Profile Suite. And in addition to looking up information about expert witnesses, this database can also be really helpful to find out information about lawyers or judges. So for judges, I have a quick search. We're going to be looking in Massachusetts. So very quickly, we're going to pick Massachusetts. Unfortunately, it's at the bottom. And I want to look for Judge William Sullivan. So I'm going to enter in his name. And I'm looking for William in the Superior Court. And it's the second one I want, very quickly. So again, you can see we're getting the same kind of information about judges. What is their case history like? We can look up cases they've been involved with, secondary materials, what their education was. So this could be helpful if we want to know, if we want to look back and see if they've had similar cases to the case that we have before them to see how they've ruled or how they've acted in the past. Okay, finally, we're going to take a quick look at attorneys, and I'm going to use a friend of mine here, David Clancy. And I'm going to limit it to Massachusetts so that we can pick him up quickly. Okay, and a lot of times when I'm typing, if I type in last name first, I couldn't run a search too, but a lot of times it'll pop the name right up for me, unless it's a very common name and I can run that search. And this is who I want, my friend who works at Skadden. And you can see we're getting the same types of information, where, what sort of jury verdicts or settlements was he involved with, the cases he's been involved with, briefs that he's filed. So we get a sense, if we want to, of how he's represented clients in the past. This can be important if it's somebody who's opposing counsel. Or possibly somebody you're interviewing with could also be helpful for that. Okay, I just want to show you, in case you don't have this tool at work, the Litigation Profile Suite, where the directories are on Lexis Advance, where you can get some similar information. Okay, so I just wanted to show you the directories here under Directories. There's a few things here. Most of what you're getting is sort of very bare bones information where somebody works. There is an expert witness directory, an attorney directory that might be helpful, a judge directory. The other place I wanted to mention is, if you don't have the Litigation Profile Suite, there are some expert witness analysis here that you might find helpful when you're looking for expert witnesses for your case. If you have this database, I will just look up the one we already know, Carol, and I'm going to do within 3 ball in case she has middle name or initial. And quickly you can see that we're getting a lot of the same kinds of information, cases that she was involved in. We're also getting expert witness analysis by, if you look at the sources here, so we're getting some reports that have been done, depositions that were filed, but it's not in that nice package that we get in the Litigation Profile Suite, but it could be some helpful information if you need to employ an expert witness. Okay, so that's it for Lexis. Let's switch over to Westlaw now. So it's going to be kind of similar on Westlaw to the categories of information, even down to some similarities between the tools that we talked about on Lexis. So there's a category of public records information that we don't have access to, unfortunately, on our academic subscription. But there are some other resources here that could be helpful, including directories, as well as expert witness materials. So that would be under expert materials. So let's just take a quick look at the directories first. And under directories, you see we have the West Legal Directory that was mentioned in the reading. We have the Westlaw Profiler, which is the one I mentioned in the slideshow, as well as a few other directories here at the bottom, including one that has information on expert witnesses or corporate counsel. So let's look at the Westlaw Profiler first, and I want to take a look at some of the same people we looked at on Lexis. Let's start with our expert witness. And we could run an advanced search just like we did on Lexis. So we could look for somebody by area of expertise and also by location, which I am going to limit it by location. But since we already know, and I just want to compare features, we're going to put in our expert witness that we found on Lexis, Carol, within let's do within 3 ball. Okay, I ran that search really quickly, and I did take a quick look, and it's the second one that we're interested in, Carol J. Ball. And there is some brief biographical information usually on the first page. We don't have too much on this person. Sometimes there's even a photo. Usually there's an address. But we do have references and reports. So let's take a look at the reports first, because these are pretty nifty. And what we're getting here is an overview of the different reports, and then we can see how many times the expert's been challenged and whether their testimony has been found to be admissible or not. So that can be really helpful if you want to know whether a particular expert has a history of having their testimony excluded. So that's that, looking at that expert report. And you can see in this case that our expert testified and their testimony was excluded. So maybe that's not a great indication. It could be that she was asked to testify to something that was going to be fairly difficult and might not reflect on the expert, but it does give you a little bit of information there. And then there's also this evaluation report. And this tells you the different appearances they've made, who did they represent, where you can find their testimony. So this can be really important information when evaluating an expert witness. The next tab that we're going to look at, so we were in the reports tab, and our expert had 2 reports, an expert challenge and an evaluator report. But the next tab are the references. So these are cases that she's been involved with, underlying documents that have her testimony that you could look at. Okay, so let's go back to the profiler and look at the information they have by judges. And this time I'm just going to take you in another way, and I want you to see that there are some other tools available to us on Westlaw that, unless you click into this Tools tab, you might not know. And one of them is the profiler, and it's down at the bottom. And we'll click into it here. And that's just another way you can get into the profiler. The one we looked at first was using directories. And we're going to look now at attorneys and judges. And we'll look up our same judge, William Sullivan. And we know that they're in Massachusetts. Or I should say he's in Massachusetts. Okay, so it's number 3 because he's the judge that we're looking for. And just like when we were on Lexis, we get some biographical information. We get a helpful report that talks about the cases, kind of consolidates everything into a report about his cases that have happened before him. So again, it's just pulling information together, what kinds of cases, by topic, attorneys that have appeared before him, the industries, all kinds of information here in that report. And then in the references tabs, those are all the cases and if there are underlying dockets, various things that were before this particular judge that might be helpful for your research. Okay, on the profile suite, you can also look for attorneys, and you'll get the similar types of information that we saw in Lexis, biographical information, links to their underlying court cases, dockets, those types of materials, which can be useful for researching opposing counsel. Okay, so on Bloomberg, they have something called the People Search, and it's information about corporate executives, judges, attorneys. So it's not necessarily your next door neighbor, unless they happen to be a judge, but there are categories of information about different people that, for example, the attorney who we used before, David Clancy, we can look up, and I'll show you a little bit of information about him that would be available. I'll just put his name in and the state. And it's very sort of brief information, but it could be helpful for finding out, basic contact information, career information. Sometimes there's more information. For example, compensation for executives would be here if it was an executive in a public company, holdings information. So it depends on who the person is, the categories of information that you're going to get. Okay, so that's the People Search. We'll be using Bloomberg Law more for company information later. Let's take a look at some free resources really quickly. Okay, one of the sources mentioned in the reading was Martindale-Hubbell, which is a large bound volume set if you're in the library, but they also have a free search. And I've entered our friend David Clancy here, and when I click on him, you'll see that on the free version of the site, there's also a subscription version, which possibly you would have access to if your firm subscribed. There's some very basic biographical information about where they practice. You can click in and look at the information about the firm and get the address, but there's very little available on the free source. There's more if you have a subscription to this database. The next people source I want to look at is the search engines, the search pages that are suggested on Justia. So this is the page that I mentioned to you that had a lot of helpful resources, and it's just a collection of different sources that I thought you might find helpful if you were looking for information about people. And there's this one, the people search. And you can basically enter any person in here and their location, and it gives back some very basic biographical information if, say, you were trying to locate a witness in a case, not an expert witness, just a witness, someone who you needed to serve or find out information about them, bare biographical information. Before we move on to statistics, I just wanted to show you this mass facts page that I mentioned in the first slideshow. You can see there's different categories of information about people and communities. There's criminal statistics, courts, education, all kinds of different helpful statistical and other factual information. Right now I want to take a quick look at the statistical sites on the World Wide Web that I mentioned in the introductory video. So this is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They themselves, of course, have statistics, but they also have this really handy list of all different government agencies, international and national places to get statistical information. And one that's often used in lawsuits are labor statistics. So I thought we'd take a quick look at that. And in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you can search in different ways, but you can look for state-specific information. You can look by information by subject. So I just looked briefly in Massachusetts. And there's a little teeny text search table here, so you can search the text of the table, and I wanted something about employment of women, so I might need this in a case to understand about how much women earn compared to men in Massachusetts. And this is what I found. It's from 2013, but it's statistics, very valid statistical information about how much women get paid as opposed to men in Massachusetts. So it's just one example of the kinds of statistics that you can find using this list of links. Some other places that you could look, I mentioned in the first video, are agency websites, or another good place to look for that type of statistical information. Okay, so that's it for our second video. It's gone kind of long, so I'm going to cut it off here. And we have another video that's going to talk about finding corporate information about companies.